like all of us, I follow political conventions and listen to the speakers, and at times I feel as turned off by them as I do about sermons, because I feel sermons do the same thing. We're always talking to the people who aren't there. If you listen to a political convention, the speech always has two things: to exhort the faithful to more faithfulness, which is a valuable thing, and to tell the enemy what they're missing, but since the enemy isn't there, it's sort of useless. There's a sense in which today's sermon is precisely that. I don't apologize for it because there's no other way to do it, but it has exactly the same focus: to exhort the faithful to greater faithfulness and to tell the enemy, those who are not involved in the church life, what they're missing. The end result, I hope, is, tell it bluntly, and now that those of us who are here will tell those of us who aren't here what they're missing. Isn't that interesting? I'm sick to death of hearing of what's going on in American society. Depending upon who you listen to on the television or the latest newscast or read in the latest newspaper, crime is decreasing or increasing depending on how you read the statistics, but I think everybody, including the FBI, has agreed crime is definitely on the increase. We're concerned about public enemy number one, inflation. We're concerned about energy crisis, particularly when the crisis hits, although we lose our concern in between times. We have poured thousands and thousands and millions of dollars down proverbial rat holes in interests of housing, medical help, and medical care. And still, in a suburb of Detroit, a church can sit on a quiet lot and have the window shot out. People are afraid to leave a door unlocked. And in our neighborhood, there are people who won't even have the screen door locked, but must have the solid door locked out of fear of what might happen to them. And so when you get people together, everybody talks about what a terrible society it is, how tragic things are, and where we're going. And you listen to the commentators on television, they've got one simple answer: we need more money. It's going to take a massive money effort to solve the problem of crime. It will take a massive money effort to solve the energy crisis. It will take a massive money effort to solve the ecology crisis. There's no doubt about it, but the interesting thing is that when you begin to look at a massive money, technologically proficient effort to solve anything, I defy you to show me a single instance involving human problems where technology and money have solved a single item. What we have become is a cop-out nation, a nation that wants others to solve without our being involved, and wants others to do what we don't want to do for ourselves. It's easier to write a check than to go yourself. It's easier to demand from somebody else than to do it yourself. And so, in the utter and complete failure of the moral climate of this country, the churches stand alone in having failed to come to grips with what it means to be moral in an immoral society. That's a strong statement. And I hope it sinks into each of us, because it's been bothering me and it's been sinking into me in the past few weeks. The post-Watergate morality is sickening because it's no better than the pre-Watergate morality. The fact that we have learned nothing is that immediately after the resignation of the president, the first act of some members of the party was to try the same games to smear the announced appointee for vice president. Strange. You would think that people would learn. But the first act of some was to begin the same political game. And the righteous indignation of those who have not been caught is rather sickening to hear. And yet when you begin to look at it, where do you find a single voice in American society about the moral dimension of life? Where? There is not an institution, including the church, that's raising the voice about the moral dimension of life. The church, as we're going to see, has been shutted off into a whole series of areas which have no relevance to life and therefore have no effect on where we're going. If you were to ask me today who is the moral voice of America, I would answer Evel Knievel. He has more people talking about him and his way of life. He has more youngsters turned on about what he calls important. He has more people that know his name than almost any person in America today. And some idiot who can rocket across a gorge and get $6 million for it and con the American people out of much more has become the spokesman to the young American of what life's all about. Con everybody for what you can get, make all the money you can, and live as dangerously as you can because life doesn't mean a damn anyhow. That's the moral climate of America, and that's the climate that Evel Knievel is a hero for, not because he created it, but because he reflects it. All right? Rip off the country. I've been thinking of doing a sermon on Max Weber, the German sociologist of religion, who was also an economist, who talked about the difference between the Protestant ethic and the ancient pagan ethic. The Protestant ethic, growing out of the Judeo-Christian experience, was that one worked because it was a God-given talent, and one did what one had to do because it was an opportunity to achieve. The ancient pagan ethic is one worked in order to receive certain amounts of gold, money, so that he could do other things. Work itself had no value. It's what you could get out of it. Next time you talk about your office staff or anybody else who just wants their paycheck and is refusing to do much for it, and who will go from job to job just flitting from place to place as long as they can pick up a paycheck, think about the difference between that and see if that also isn't a part of where we are in terms of our moral decadence. Now, why? The foundations of this country, of Western culture, have been religion. The fundamental rules and orders of society have been religion. But what we've done is relegate the church and religion to mere opinion, and with it, standards of right and wrong become opinion. Now think about that. As soon as you open your mouth or you hear somebody talk about religion, which is so rare that it ought to shock you, you can probably think of the last time it happened some time ago, somebody immediately steps in and says, well, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to your opinion. What a stupid approach to life. Everything is opinion. It doesn't matter whether there's any validity to it or not. It's merely your opinion, and you have your rights to your opinion. If it means that your opinion is full of hatred and bigotry, that's your right. It's an opinion. If it means that your opinion is full of hatred against yourself and your fellow man, that's right. It's your opinion. If it means that your opinion is that God is a pig, that's your right. It's your opinion. It doesn't really matter. And as soon as you say it doesn't matter, how can you talk about moral impact? Because mere opinion does not carry weight. And so how do you teach your kids that there is a moral dimension to life when you also teach them it's all opinion? How do you talk about standards of right and wrong when you're also saying it's a matter of opinion? How can you be shocked when you come to grips with things in your own life when it's also been made in society merely a matter of opinion? And who can be upset with what goes on in political offices anywhere? Because after all, it's just a matter of mere opinion. It's about time that the church begin to come to grips with what it means to be what Reinhold Niebuhr called moral man in immoral society, and to show that what they are saying has a validity beyond mere opinion. To move forward out of the realm of it's anybody's kind of thing into the realm of that which is essential. Because in the second place, the church and religion has been relegated to the realm of the apparent non-essential, that is the hereafter, and not today's world. Two things you don't talk about, politics and religion. Now, Reverend Lyons, we like the way you preach and so on, and we appreciate that. We've been thinking about joining your church, but I have one thing to ask you. Do you ever make any statements about politics or society? Because I don't want to belong to a church that talks about society or about politics. Well, what do you want me to talk about? Well, talk about God and things hereafter. Well, is there any relevance to God and the things here? Oh, yeah, but don't talk about that. I don't want to be bothered about those things. It's a mythical conversation, but it's very real. You see, we don't want the church to deal with immorality. We don't want the church to deal with the questions of a society. We don't want the Word of God, the prophetic voice, to prick our consciences and to cause us to change our opinions. We want to go along, and if it be ignorant, let it be ignorant. But don't challenge us to come to grips with what it means. How do you expect morality in society when there is nobody who will even make an effort to define what morality is? The few times that the church makes a staggering effort, it usually ends up jumping on somebody else's definition of morality. Jacques Ellul in the City defines it very beautifully as what he calls a bandwagon Christianity. A band comes along marching, it claims to have some good, and a lot of people leap on the back and say, hey, baptize it, make it Christian. But where do we find any place? Politics, schools, business, sports, hospitals, any place that deals with the major moral dimension of man and his relationship. And how can we be unhappy with anybody who does anything, since there's no way to define what's right and wrong? And so the church has been relegated to that which is somewhere off there. The churches which are growing are precisely those churches which promise you something in the future to come, but never ask you to do anything here. And if you don't believe it, listen sometime to some of the radio stations which gear to this kind of religion. And you will find people on a talk show calling in, praising the Lord Jesus Christ on one hand and condemning their neighbor to hell on the other. Now, what I'm saying about all this is that the church has got to begin to come to grips. I'm not calling for crusades. I don't want to burn people of opposite faith at the altar. I don't want to instill hatred and violence between people. I think that what we need is to talk about the moral dimension in life, in society, in religion, and hold true to our principles and not be afraid to speak out to those around us. And to be willing to be challenged by what they've got. To listen, to enter into dialogue, to talk one with the other, and to hear and understand their truth as well as we expect to hear and understand our truth. Religion, if it has anything to do at all with life, needs to be part of life. And to relegate it to the hereafter, to relegate it to opinion, I think is absolutely sheer nonsense. And it's interesting, too, in the third place, in the last place, in this very brief concept, which I hope has something behind it, the idea of where the church is and its importance is very significant. It's a charity. It's a charity and tax deductible on the basis of being a charity. And like any other charity, it's something which is good if you want it to be good, and it's something that you commit yourself to if you haven't got anything else to do, but it's not first in our lives, because when things get tight, we draw away from the church. We can't support it. It's the last thing that we begin to support. Now, isn't that interesting? You know, I served in the church for 6 months as an interim minister. There had been the tragic death of the minister. It was the most successful pastor I've ever had anywhere. And the reason it was successful is because wasn't my doing at all. We took in a church that's almost this size. It was a little larger at the time, not much. In 1 6-month period, 78 new members with an interim pastor. Every one of those people who joined knew that Jim Lyons that week or the next week or the following week would be gone. 78 new members in 6 months. You know why? We had one guy in the church. He was a milkman. Couldn't sleep. Went to bed at 2, got up at 4, delivered his milk, and then he said, I had some time. So I began to do some things. So I went around and talked to people. And they asked me why I was interested in the church. He said, I have 5 daughters. He said, and I'm interested that those 5 daughters learn something about what life means in the moral dimension of life. And consequently, I want that church to be there for my daughters, and that church can't be there without you and me working to make it there. Came in, he said, I've been listening to you week after week, and he said, I get up and I go out and I do things, and I come next Sunday and I sit back and say, thank God I've done my job now. And then he said, you say something, and I begin to think, no, I haven't done my job. I still have obligation. And I can do my job better, and he goes out and did a little bit more. Now, I call on some of those people, too. You know what they said to me? It's your job to call. I said, well, I suppose you're right. But they said when he came by to call, we knew that here was a guy that believed the church was important, and we caught fire with it, too. 78 new members in 6 months' time because one man, a milkman, was concerned about where his children were going to learn about the moral concepts of life. He did not think it was a shame to talk about religion. He did not think that religion was something as a charity. He thought that the religion and the church was an essential in his life, and it was so essential he was willing to put himself into it. He was not embarrassed by his faith commitment. And that's the key word. It's nice to belong to a church, but it's embarrassing to be religious. Think about it. Anybody say, do you go to church? Oh, yes. Are you religious? Well, I'm not too religious. We all want to be nice guys. We all want to participate in ongoing life, and we don't want to be known as goody-goodies. So we apologize for the fact that we're at the church. Well, our minister's not like the normal minister. He's sort of a regular guy. He's got a beard, and he's not like the rest of them. And we can invite him by and relax with him. It's not like really going to a church. And then we wonder why Evel Knievel captures the mind of the nation. Why his morality becomes the morality of the nation. Why, when we have said, let's work so we can get away from it all, and let's leave the church whenever we can, and that's what we teach our kids, that the church is important only as an afterthought or when you haven't got anything else to do. Where do they learn morality? Well, it seems to me if we're going to really understand who needs the church, obviously you do and I do, but I think a lot of other people do too. And what I'm saying, I think, and what I'm coming to grips with is that if we're sick and tired of where society is going, we ought to be sick and tired of handing society and its reins over to the technocrats who are interested in only technological improvement. We are sick and tired, we ought not to hand it over to the tax collectors who are interested only in increasing the taxes, but we ought to hand the reins of society over to moral man who raises, comes to grips with, and challenges the individual to get out and do it himself. All of the agencies for welfare and help are of value all the way down the line, but they aren't as good as a personal contact saying, can I help you? All of the professional roles are fine down the line, but they're not as good as the moral man saying, I understand, and can I be of help? And when is the church going to recognize that its role and function is not to trail along, taking the droppings of society and being pleased about it, but to run up in front and say to society, get cracking because you ain't any good anyhow. And it's about time that we tell you that. You technocrat, fine. We're going to use your technology, but you're not going to guide us because you haven't got the foggiest idea of what it means to be moral. That which works is your rule. And what it does in terms of working, in terms of destroying man, ecology, people, human effort, human dignity is not the question you even ask. And you're not allowed to ask it in your professional way. And so we are going to understand and help you to understand that what you do with that technology affects the human dimension of life, therefore the moral dimension of life, therefore the godly dimension of life, and we have something to say about that. And we apologize to no man for saying that you can make the difference. So the time has come for the church to get off its proverbial rump and get moving. Time has come, I think, for the church to quit playing the silly games it plays. Time has come for the church to quit building around the fact that it's a fellowship. If you want to have a party somewhere else. Not that we shouldn't have fellowship together. It's not that we shouldn't meet together. It's not that we shouldn't have parties together. It's not that we shouldn't have a good time together. But that's not the reason for the church. We do it because we come for another reason. That is to learn about God in our lives together. To challenge together. To suffer together. To learn together. To stand together. To overcome together. For that's the role and the function of the church. And all of these other things grow out of it. They don't cause it. And what has happened is we've been more interested in the other things than we have in that which only we can do, raise the moral questions of life. Who needs a church anyhow? You do. I do. We do. And they do. But how will they know unless we take it to them? Next week, responsibility, a eulogy, a sermon on the death of a concept and a fact.